Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. And as always, I'd like to start by thanking the following people that sent me, linked me, tagged me, whatever it was, a lot of this information. This was an insane week, and I say that a lot, but this was an insane week to the point where I think some of these might actually have to be punted to next week in the interest of time. So with that, I'd like to thank Chris Fellon, Jason Dance, Richard Reefer, Charlie Northrup, David Walker, and Bear Peterson. Guys, thank you so much for all of these things. And with that, let's get started. Now, first things first, we are going to basically talk about something that is going to affect a lot of you that are watching or listening to this, and that is LinkedIn. Because a second massive LinkedIn breach reportedly exposed the data of 700 million users, which is more than 92% of the total 756 million users that LinkedIn has. So odds are, if you are watching or listening to this on LinkedIn, you were affected. Now, this database is for sale on the dark web with records including phone numbers, physical addresses, geolocation data, and inferred salaries, and we will get to that. Now, the attacker who obtained the data has posted a sample of the 1 million records, and checks confirm that the data is both genuine and up to date. June 22nd was basically when this went online for sale on the dark web, and the official, the official data that they have, that we have seen rather, is email addresses, full names, phone numbers, physical addresses, geolocation records, LinkedIn username and profile URL, personal and professional experience and background, genders, and other social media accounts and usernames. If you have linked through things like SSO to other social media accounts, no passwords were included in this, so obviously that's a huge problem. Heads up, LinkedIn users. Moving on, let's talk about MonPass. This is one of Mongolia's largest certificate authorities. Attackers breached a server belonging to MonPass and basically backdoored into the company's official client server with a Cobalt Strike-based backdoor. Now, this backdoor was active inside the company's official certificate installer app between February 8th and March 3rd of this year, according to the security research firm Avast that found this. Now, a security breach came to light in late March when Avast discovered this installer in one of their own customer systems and then alerted them. So heads up, if you use MonPass in Mongolia for all your certificate needs, you may have been affected. Moving on, I want to give you guys an update on Electronic Arts, or EA's massive breach update. Basically, they're facing right now even more criticism from the cybersecurity industry after ignoring warnings from security researchers in December of last year that multiple vulnerabilities left them severely exposed to attackers. Officials from the Israeli cybersecurity firm CyberPion approached EA last year to inform them that multiple domains that they owned could be subject to takeovers as well as misconfiguration of potentially unknown assets alongside basically the domains with misconfigured DNS records. But even after sending EA a detailed document about how these, about the problems that they have with their proof of concept, CyberPion co-founder told ZDNet that EA did nothing to address these issues, and here we are. They got a lot of game data and player data, etc., stolen. If you recall, I mentioned that on this show or podcast or whatever earlier. So, with that, let's move on because we have no time to lose today. Right now, we're going to be talking about the Central Bank of Denmark, known as Danmarks National Bank. This is actually a SolarWinds update. That's right, they were using SolarWinds Orion, and here we are. We knew we were going to start to see them start disclosing. They might be one of the first that we didn't know from that initial round. Now, Russian state hackers compromised Denmark's central bank and planted malware that gave them access to the network for more than half a year without being detected. Now, this compromise came to light after technology publication out of Denmark, version 2, obtained official documents from the Danish central bank through a Freedom of Information request. The SolarWinds campaign obviously is considered one of the most sophisticated supply chain attacks, in history, and we will get to this week because, Lord, we've got a competitor here. Now, despite the attackers' long-term access, the bank said it found no evidence of the compromise beyond the first stage of attack, as it happened with thousands of organizations that installed the Trojanized version of SolarWinds Orion. I literally did presentations and slideshows on this. Now, this indicates that Denmark Central Bank was merely a victim of the larger attack and not a target with interest to the attackers. At least that's what they believe. And obviously, a lot of U.S. federal agencies were caught up with that as well. So hopefully, Denmark's national bank in Denmark is correct. But they move something like 86 billion euros a day of currency through Denmark. So it's obviously a huge problem for that country if it's worse. Moving on. Let's talk about Microsoft again for like the fourth or fifth time in a row. Seems like every week I've got something Microsoft. Seems like they're on somebody's target list right now. So they own a domain called HaloWaypoint.com, and that represents the Halo video game series published by Microsoft Xbox Game Studios. A researcher actually hit that domain with a dependency hijacking attack, and then the researcher, being successful, contacted Microsoft to let them know that they had a problem. So he might not have been the first, we don't know. But some of the data that he got the Microsoft server to basically give him was the system username, path to application development environments, various IDs, and stuff like that. Microsoft responded when talking to the publication Bleeping Computer, and I quote, "We investigated and determined that the underlying issue has already been addressed prior to the report." So hopefully that is true, and Microsoft has locked that down. Crazy. Moving on, let's talk about Siemens Simatic, SIMATIC, HMI comfort panels. These devices are meant to provide visualization of data received from industrial equipment, and they're exposing their telnet service without any form of authentication, according to security researchers, meaning you could just walk right into it using an unsecured telnet connection. Now, this bug has industry security experts worried that this misconfiguration could lead to scenarios where the threat actors could remotely access these panels and tamper with the data that they supply. Because they are managing industrial control systems, that's obviously a huge problem, especially for things like espionage, and fraud and all those things. So we'll see where that happens, and hopefully Siemens will correct that soon. Moving on, let's talk about the UK's Ministry of Defence. This is kind of interesting and somewhat amusing. Now, classified Ministry of Defence documents were actually found at a bus stop in Kent. Now, these documents contain details about the HMS Defender battleship and the British military itself. One set of documents discusses the likely Russian reaction to that ship's passage through Ukrainian waters off the Crimea coast on this past Wednesday. Another details plans for possible UK military presence in Afghanistan after the United States-led NATO operation ends there. The documents, about 50 pages, were found in a soggy heap behind a bus stop in Kent early Tuesday morning. A member of the public that wanted to remain anonymous contacted the BBC when he realized just how sensitive this information was. The BBC believes these documents, which include emails, PowerPoint presentations, originated in the office of a senior official, basically at the Ministry of Defense. These documents relating to the Royal Navy's Type 45 destroyer, the HMS Defender, show that a mission described by the Ministry of Defense as a, quote, innocent passage through Ukrainian territorial waters with guns covered and the ship's helicopter stowed in its hangar was conducted in expectation that Russia might respond aggressively, meaning they're passing through there, but they're not going to raise the flag and lower the guns and all that kind of stuff. They're going to show that they are not there to be hostile. So obviously that's interesting. I'm just curious to know if somebody just from the Ministry of Defense just dropped them at a bus stop in Kent. Like, what happened there? No idea. But ain't got time to lose this week. We're going to move on. Let's let's talk about Japanese shipping company Kawasaki Kaizen Kaisha. They're just known as K-Line, which is much easier for me to say as well. And they issued a brief statement on July 3rd, confirming that their computer systems have once again been breached with, and I quote, unauthorized access to overseas subsidiary systems. One of Japan's oldest and largest shipping companies with a fleet of more than 400 ships, K-Line has only recently recovered from a previous cyber attack, although an overseas affiliate, through an overseas affiliate of their shipping line. So hopefully K-Line out of Japan will get it straightened out and secure themselves. Crazy. Moving on. Let's talk about network equipment vendor Belden. You might recall, if you're a longtime listener or viewer of mine, that I talked about them in November of 2020 when they first had a data breach. They did not realize, though, that any protected health information, or PHI, was involved until April of this year, which is when Belden then notified Health and Human Services here in the United States that protected health information that they were maintaining as part of their health plan had potentially impacted 6,348 individuals, obviously employees and former employees and dependents, spouses and dependents of them. So this week, Belden published a substitute notice that provided more details and informed people impacted by the breach of what they could do to protect themselves. So if you've worked for Belden, heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about the massive Arthur J. Gallagher. They're a US-based global insurance brokerage and risk management firm, and they are mailing breach notification letters to potentially impacted individuals following a ransomware attack that hit their systems in late September of last year. Now, the data includes basically everything you can possibly humanly think of in their disclosure. We're talking about personal details like names and dates of birth, contact details such as phone, email address, etc., postal address, mobile number, government-issued IDs like Social Security, national insurance, passports, and on, health and medical details such as health certificates, policy details such as policy numbers and types, bank details like payment details, account numbers, sort codes, driver's license details, login information to their network such as usernames, passwords, and answers to security questions, information relating to any claims, other information received from applications or required questionnaires such as occupation, current employer, etc. Now, they are one of the largest insurance brokers in the world, and they have over 33,000 employees and operations in 49 countries. This company is also ranked number 429 on the Fortune 500 list, so this is obviously a huge problem. So if you have or use Arthur J. Gallagher in your life, you might want to check in. Moving on, let's talk about a startup called SalesKen.ai. An India-based technology startup, SalesKen, has secured an exposed server that was basically leaking private and sensitive data on one of their customers, Byju, which is an education technology giant and India's most valuable startup. That's a problem. Now, the server was left unprotected since at least June 14th, according to historical data provided by Shodan, which is a search engine that looks for those kinds of things. Because the server was without a password, anybody could have accessed Byju's data. Now, the server contained names and classes taken by students and email addresses and phone numbers of parents and teachers. The server also contained other data related to students, such as chat logs between parents, identified by their phone numbers, and also White Hat Junior staff, which I'm guessing is part of Byju, as well as comments recorded by teachers about their students. So if you use Byju in some way, shape, or form, and you think your teacher hates you, you might be able to find it on the dark web. Obviously a huge problem. Moving on, let's talk about the public distribution system, or PDS, of the state of Tamil Nadu, also in India. They just had a data breach of over 4.5 million citizens. Major details including personally identifiable information and Aadhaar, which I believe is the health number of citizens, basically has been put to sale on a data sharing platform in the dark web. So obviously a huge problem. If you're from Tamil Nadu, you might want to check in with your government on their public distribution system. Moving on. Let's talk about primary care medtech firm One Medical. They sent emails with basically hundreds of other customer email addresses visible in the to field. Now, here's the thing. Despite claiming it wasn't a security breach, and it's clearly a violation of HIPAA here in the United States. They basically followed up. It was followed up by a basically hilarious reply all storm by multiple users CC'd in the email, and then it ended up on Twitter, basically meaning people are like, yeah, you got us violated, and everybody was talking to everybody under One Medical. So obviously that's a PR nightmare for them, especially when it got public on One Medical, and here we are talking about it. So if you have anything to do with One Medical, you can go check Twitter for that. Moving on, let's talk about Spain's fourth largest telecom operator, MásMóvil Ibercom. Now, I don't have much on this beyond the fact that Revil just hit them and dumped their data onto a leak site. And so as soon as I have more, I'll let you know. But heads up, if you're using the internet service provider, MásMóvil Ibercom in Spain, you might want to check in. Moving on, let's head on down to South Africa and talk about insurance provider Qsure. They just got hit by a major data breach earlier this month, one that led to banking information and other sensitive data being compromised. The company hasn't said how many records were essentially stolen during this intrusion, and that's all we've got so far. But if you use Qsure in South Africa, heads up to you. Moving on, I want to give you an update on Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket Steamship Authority. And I quote, "After a rigorous evaluation of our systems, this investigation has now concluded, and the cybersecurity investigators have confirmed that no sensitive information, including customer data or payment information, was viewed or downloaded during this incident." So that's a sigh of relief if you are using the Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket Steamship Authority for all your shipping needs or traveling needs to get to those two islands. Moving on, let's talk about Getter. This is Gettr. If you've never heard of this, I have no doubt that you haven't, because there's about 1,000 people on it right now. Basically, this is a Twitter knockoff that was started by a former Trump administration official. His name is Jason Miller, and it was started basically to compete with Parler and some others as an uncensored free speech platform. Obviously, it just got launched. Last I heard, like I said, it had about 1,000 users, so it's essentially brand new, and so they just got hit. Somebody just nailed them, and because the attackers got in, and obviously they were changing the accounts on basically the most well-known people of the 1,000 people that were there. Those former Trump administration officials that are there, or Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is on that platform. They all got hit, and all of their names got changed to, and I quote, "At Juba Baghdad was here. Follow me on Twitter." Smiley face. So there you go. Somebody got into the system, was able to basically get into the back end, and there you go. Always bake in good cybersecurity to your development. That's a huge problem. And finally, like I said, I'm punting some of these because we are going to take some time on this one, and we are going to be talking about Kaseya. Now, you may not know who they are, and if you were in cybersecurity, then you're probably shaking your head and drinking right now at the same time, especially if you use them. But this one is shaping up to be the worst ransomware hit in history, given the size and scope. Though we will see if it surpasses SolarWinds in terms of importance, as this one is flying way more under the radar for major news outlets. Perhaps it's the fatigue of breaches at this point, but also SolarWinds Orion caters to a different set for management than Kaseya does, and I will talk about that shortly. But first, a quick primer on who Kaseya is if you don't know. And essentially, we're going to be talking about their product, Kaseya VSA. Basically, they are commonly used in terms of the Kaseya VSA platform, is a commonly used solution by MSPs or managed service providers. This is basically your IT providers here in the United States and the United Kingdom, but also globally as well. Just those are the two primary markets, and it helps these MSPs manage their client systems. Kaseya's websites claims that they have over 40,000 customers. That means MSPs that are using their software to manage a bazillion companies out there, because obviously one MSP is not going to have one client. They're going to have a lot. So obviously this is a huge problem, especially when it comes to supply chain attacks. Now, by design, Kaseya VSA has administrator rights all the way down to the client system, which means that the managed service providers have essentially quote-unquote God rights basically into the computer and the servers they're managing. This basically is a common situation with many remote managed monitoring or RMM solutions that compete with Kaseya in their market. And this is why I think SolarWinds is more sensational, because most MSPs work in small to mid-sized business. The more enterprise side or the larger government side tend to use SolarWinds Orion or ManageEngine or some of these other larger, more robust platforms. And I think when SolarWinds got hit, obviously by Russian attackers, that was a huge, huge problem, because you're looking at like the Department of Treasury, that level of client there, and that's a huge, huge problem. Now, with that, we have to talk about Kaseya, because this one is just beyond damaging to small to mid-sized business and obviously some enterprise as well, although the primary target is small to mid-sized. Now, Revel, as I just mentioned before, and I'm talking about these guys like every week, they got into this system, these platforms, and they were able to poison these Kaseya VSA instances that the MSPs were using with an infected update. Now, Delivery of ransomware was via an automated fake software update using Kaseya's VSA platform. The attacker immediately stops administrator access to the VSA, then adds a task called Kaseya VSA hotfix. Kaseya VSA agent hotfix. Now, this fake update was then deployed across basically the entire estate, including on MSP customer systems, and it masquerades as a fake management agent update. This management agent update was actually the REvil ransomware, and to be clear, this means that organizations that are not Kaseya's customers were getting hit. Meaning, if I'm running a business and I have an MSP that is supplying me with Kaseya, I am that MSP's client. The MSP is Kaseya. They're Kaseya's client. That's the supply chain here. Now, as of yesterday, July 3rd, and the numbers are still coming down, there was at least, or rather coming in, they're not going down, they're going up. So they're coming in and going up. There's at least 40 managed service providers that were hit, one of those being the rather large group Synex MSP. Synex actually also sells equipment and software and all that kind of stuff and has MSP services. They are a rather large player in the MSP world. They were hit along with other large ones, and over 1,000 companies so far that were using these MSPs for these services, specifically Kaseya, were hit and locked out with ransomware. That's right, REvil has hit over 1,000 companies basically instantly using this methodology. Now, we don't know who all these companies are that were hit. Obviously, it's going to take months of me being here every Sunday pounding away to show you, okay, here's another Kaseya disclosure, here we go. But a major one that was very public and visible in that country was the supermarket chain Coop, who actually had to close all 800 of their stores because they couldn't access their point of sales. They couldn't get into anything. They are one of Sweden's largest supermarket chains. So that's obviously a huge problem. And so the question becomes, who is REvil? Let's take a quick look at them because they've been a major player in double extortion ransomware, and not a week goes by where I'm mentioning them here in at least one attack. And prior to this, I just mentioned a Spanish telecom that got hit by REvil. So these guys are very busy. Now, here's the nutshell on them. REvil is an ambitious criminal, basically ransomware as a service enterprise that basically first came to prominence in April of 2009, following the demise of another ransomware gang known as Grand Crab. I remember those guys. Now, the REvil group is also known by other names such as Sodin or Sodin Nobiki as well. REvil has gained reputation for attempting to extort far larger payments from its corporate victims than are typically seen in other attacks or by other attackers. It is actively promoted underground cybercrime forums as the best choice for attacking business networks where there is money to be made, or rather more money to be made than just infecting the computers of home users. We have seen a massive shift from like that grandma in Idaho that just accidentally clicked that link and said, hey, grandma, you're going to have to give me $500 to get your data back. Now it's moving to corporations where REvil's saying, you know what, we'll take 10 million and we're good. So they obviously do their homework, they execute, here we are. Now, aside from the many high-profile companies and organizations that basically have been hit by REvil, it is stealing data from the computers and networks of its victims before they are encrypted. That's the double extortion side. Now, this is basically a technique of applying additional pressure on victims, and it's becoming more and more commonplace. So it's no longer just saying, we don't care if we got infected, we've got a backup and it sucks we're down for a day, but we'll restore. Because they have the data, they're basically saying, even if you don't pay, we're going to put it out there onto the dark web. REvil threatens to release that stolen data by auctioning it off on their website, which they call Happy Blog. It's one of those ones that we track daily here at Security Fanatics. And yes, they actually do call it Happy Blog, and it's updated damn near daily with various organizations and companies that they have hit and they are ransoming, and you can actually go see the data there. Now, as online crime has become more sophisticated, some malicious actors started recognizing that rather than spending all of their time launching their own attacks, they could just actually lease out the expertise and infrastructure to other criminals, giving basically those without the technical ability a means to profit from ransomware. Meaning, this is crazy. This is where REvil comes in. So you can basically hire them and get their software and then split the profits with them. You're leasing that time and that capability, and it's one of the reasons why they've been so prolific. So when you get hit with REvil, it might be actually REvil's customers hitting it. We saw that with the dark side ransomware gang, where it looked like the attack techniques of REvil, and obviously that's a gang that seemed to be using REvil as ransomware as a service, software as a service. It's absolutely crazy. Now, the group's developers have claimed in interviews anonymously that they're making more than $100 million every single year. That's 100 million US for the record. So it's difficult to pinpoint, though, for the record, their exact location, but they are, according to all estimates and confidence levels, they are thought to be in Russia due to the fact, and there's different indicators of compromise on them, but one of the core facts is that the group does not target Russian organizations or those in the former Soviet bloc. Those countries obviously have corporations that could pay out ransoms, but REvil is simply not targeting those, and so there is a belief that they have ties there. Obviously, recently President Biden came out during the Colonial Pipeline thing and chastised Russia for allowing gangs like REvil to basically use their infrastructure basically to hit us, but this is obviously a very serious problem, and nobody is saying that REvil has ties to something like Russian intelligence, although there's no reason why Russian intelligence couldn't be using them to do ransomware attacks. It's because they lease out to essentially whoever can pay them. So this is obviously a huge problem that we have here. That's the nutshell of REvil. Kaseya is going to be a problem for quite some time because, again, you're looking at 40,000 customers that Kaseya claims compared to 18,000 customers of SolarWinds, although SolarWinds customers tend to be on the much larger organizational size than Kaseya customers. Nevertheless, this is a huge problem that just is striking fear into MSPs everywhere. And we've seen MSPs, managed service providers, these IT companies basically targeted for quite some time, because if you can break into an IT company, you're breaking into their clients. You can get their usernames and passwords. You can get all of these things. And I've seen other platforms basically be attacked that once they get into the MSP looking for those things. So it's a huge, huge problem that we have here. One of those things that MSPs really oftentimes need help with is good cybersecurity practices. A lot of them will sell data security solutions, which is a subset of cybersecurity, but obviously there are different ranges. Not all products are built the same and all of that. So, I'm not sitting here poking fingers in the eyes of any MSP or anything like that. I want everybody to be as secure as they possibly can. This is a huge, huge problem. And so if you're on Kaseya's advice is to shut down VSA until they have fixes in place. But you might want to simply take a look at somewhere else. Kaseya is not alone, obviously. SolarWinds got hit. These two are not going to be the only two, in this type of management that is going to be hit. They're being targeted constantly, as are things like password managers and everything else. But you got to understand, we're all in this together. So we've got to make, the best choice that we can. We've got to make sure that we have security end to end. And when you're installing something that is giving basically God rights into a system, that really takes deep pause. And so by virtue of that, we've got to make sure that we are handling these things in the most secure manner that we possibly can. So it's a mess out there for everybody. I wish all of the MSPs caught up in this the best of luck. I hope you guys didn't get hit. I hope you weren't infected by this, or if you were, you caught it before any of your clients were infected, or you were infected indeed. So best of luck to you. And with that, those were your breaches of the week. And I would like to end by saying happy 4th of July to my fellow Americans and colleagues and all of that. And I hope you guys have had a safe and fun 4th of July, as it is our Independence Day. And to everybody else, you're cool too. All good. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.